Hello children, we are discussing chapter 15, our environment. In this video, we will discuss what is food chain. What is food chain? In your previous classes, you must have heard about this term, bache. A food chain is a sequence of organisms in which one organism is eaten up by another. So one organism is eaten up by the next one in a community for food energy. That transfer, that sequence is known as food chain. ये एक ऐसा सीक्वेंस है बच्चे जिसमें एक ऑर्गेनिज्म अगले के द्वारा खाया जाएगा. One organism eats up the other one in a sequential manner, that is a food chain. Or you can say a sequence which tells us who eats whom, who is going to eat whom. That sequence telling is referred as a food chain. उसे हम food chain कहते हैं. On the basis of habitat, these food chains are of two types. The first one is terrestrial food chain. The food chain present on land are known as terrestrial food chain. For example, grass is eaten up by elephant. So this is producer and this is herbivore. That's it. Only two organisms are there in one food chain. Next, grass is eaten up by deer and deer is eaten up by lion. This one is producer, this is herbivore, and this is consumer, carnivore, the primary carnivore. Next, grass is eaten by grasshopper. Grasshopper is eaten up by frog, and frog is eaten up by hawk or eagle. A chain in which four organisms are there. Next, grass is eaten up by grasshopper. Grasshopper is eaten by frog. This frog is eaten by snake, and then snake is followed up by hawk or eagle or peacock. One thing is common among these all food chains, that producer will start a food chain always. The plants, the producers will be the first point of a food chain. Whereas at the last, top carnivore exists, except this one. This is an exception, bache. Elephant is an organism which is not easily eaten up by the top carnivore like tiger and lion. So this is the chain in which two levels are there only. And in others there are 3, then 4, followed up by the 5. A food chain usually is of either 5 to 6 levels. Next term, which we can discuss here only, is what are trophic levels? Each level of a food chain in which energy or food energy is transferred is known as trophic level. हर level बच्चे जिस पर energy, food energy transfer हो रही है, that individual level of a food chain is known as trophic level. This is 2 trophic level food chain. This is 3 trophic level food chain, and this 4 trophic levels are there, and this 5 trophic levels are there. For example, this one is producer, this one is herbivore, the primary consumer, this is carnivore, this is secondary carnivore, and this one is top carnivore. So these are the various trophic levels of a food chain. So each individual step at which the food energy is transferred is known as trophic level. And usually the food chains are of 5 to 6 trophic levels. Next, we'll discuss the second type of food chain, that is aquatic food chain. The sequence of organisms in which one organism is eaten up by the next one and have a aquatic habitat, that is known as aquatic food chain. The food chain present in the water basically are referred as aquatic food chains. The example of aquatic food chain is, the first ones are the phytoplanktons. Phytoplanktons are the plants which are usually found in the water. The small plants which are usually referred as the floating plants. Phytoplanktons are eaten up by zooplanktons. The zooplanktons are the herbivores. Then these herbivores get eaten up by small fishes. These small fishes are primary carnivore, which feeds upon the herbivores. Then these primary carnivores, these small fishes, are eaten up by kingfishers. These are the top carnivore. Instead of it, you may also write the sharks, the large fishes. That will be also correct. So this is the example of aquatic food chain, the food chain which usually exists in the water. It is a very, very important NCERT question for your board exam as well. That is, give an example of aquatic food chain. So aquatic food chain is phytoplanktons, that is the producers of aquatic organism or aquatic life habitat, are eaten up by the zooplanktons, that is the herbivores. Herbivores are eaten up by the small fishes, the primary carnivores, and then primary carnivores are eaten up by the top carnivore like kingfishers, or you can write shark as well. Next topic which we are going to discuss is food web. You know what, bachcho? In an ecosystem, various trophic levels of a food chain are interconnected at various points. And those interconnection between the various trophic levels of a food chain will lead to the formation of a web-like structure in a community, in an ecosystem, and that web-like structure is known as food web. So what is a food web, bache? The interconnected trophic levels of various food chains in an ecosystem forms a web-like structure, and that web-like structure is known as food web. The various trophic levels, बच्चे जो दूसरे trophic levels हैं वो एक दूसरे से interconnected हो जाते हैं sometimes, and that will form a complex network. There is a web-like network in the ecosystem. That web-like structure is known as food web. For example, बच्चे, this grass or producers are eaten up by a rabbit directly, and this rabbit is directly eaten up by hawk. The top carnivore. This plant products or the grass products are eaten up by the mice or rats, and the mice is eaten directly by the hawk. This grass is eaten up by the grasshopper. Grasshopper is eaten up by snake, and then snake is eaten up by the frog. This mice is directly eaten up by the frog. So from the snake much. Next, this grass is eaten up by the seed-eating birds directly, and these seed-eating birds are directly eaten up by the hawk. This grasshopper is eaten up by the frog, in a separate food chain, and this frog is eaten up by the snake as well as by the hog directly. So you can see, bache, there is various interconnections are formed between these chains, and these interconnections will form a web-like structure between the various food chains, and that web-like structure is known as food web. When the trophic levels of various food chains are interconnected, and thus this interconnection will form a web-like structure, and that web-like structure is known as food web. There are certain advantages of food web over the food chain. Food web के कुछ फायदे हैं बच्चों. First one, it prevents starvation. Starvation means bhook. As the interconnected food chains, interconnected trophic levels will allow our organism for the multiple options of food. So that organism does not easily undergo starvation. That organism does not face starvation. बच्चे अगर मान लो स्नेक को ग्रास हॉपर नहीं मिल रहा तो वो फ्रॉग को खाकर भी काम चला सकता है. Snake seed eating bird भी खा सकता है if it will approach it, and somehow in the nature it can prey upon it. It can eat mice if frogs are not there, as they come only in the rainy season usually. So it prevents the starvation for a particular species. Second, it checks overpopulation. Food web checks the overpopulation of a particular species. It does not allow one species to grow exponentially. It checks the overpopulation. अगर बच्चे एक species बढ़ रही है, मान लो frogs बढ़ रहे हैं, तो snake has more food to eat, बेटा. Snake can easily find the frogs and eat. So it will check the overpopulation of a particular species. Next, food web maintains the balance of an endangered species. As it allows the endangered species to grow. Why, bache? If there is an endangered species and that endangered species is preyed upon by a predator, then bache, food webs allow that predator to feed upon other species and let that endangered species to grow. अगर एक endangered species है बच्चे, उसका नंबर बहुत कम रह गया है, तो बच्चे जो predator उसे बहुत मशक्कत करनी पड़ेगी, उसे बहुत हार्ड वर्क करना पड़ेगा to find it. उसकी जगह वो predator क्या करेगा? That predator will shift its focus on another prey, and henceforth endangered species will get a chance to reproduce and again maintain its balance, its population balance in the environment. Whereas food chain does not allow these advantages, beta. So that is the difference between the food chain and food web. So the advantages of food web are: it prevents starvation, it checks overpopulation of a particular species, and third one is it maintains or it helps in the survival of endangered species.